as a result of frozen exposure to the elements, but also in terms of renovations that they're conducting for the building overall. It has led to residents being without water for 8 weeks as of today. The correspondence also speaks to the fact that the tenants who remain in this building are sick, they're elderly, and or disabled, and who feel very concerned about their public health and safety in the context of the fact that they cannot properly wash their hands, cannot properly wash dishes, and are routinely unable to flush their toilets because of inadequate supply of water. And, you know, if I can, Mayor, the piece that really hits home is the fact that David describes it as perhaps the worst thing is the loss of hope that we initially had that the situation would be remedied quickly. And if I could, through you, I do have a couple of questions to staff as it relates to this file. First of all, if I could generally just get an update at what is the situation and where are we at as a municipality on this file, and then a few other questions after that. Thank you.
Thanks. Jim Thorne, please.
Yes, through the chair, and Director of Licensing and Bylaw Services, Monica Ciriellos, on the WebEx, so she could respond to that.
Good morning, through the chair to the councillor, Monica Ciriello, Director of Licensing and Bylaw Services. So there was a Property Standards Committee hearing yesterday. The property order that was issued by MLE in January stands, so repairs are to be completed. Next steps look like a communication update will be circulated to all councillors today. A communication will be prepared and hand delivered to the residents so that they have an understanding of what next steps look like. We will also be proactively monitoring the potable water. At this point, the city has been providing potable water to the tenants, and moving forward, the landlord will be doing so. So we want to make sure that that potable water is adequate, and we will be proactively monitoring that. And we also want to make sure that the city and the landlord are aware of what the residents are looking for in terms of accommodations during this next couple of weeks in sort of moving forward. So we will be proactively working with the tenants.
Thank you for that overview. Director Ciriello, if I can, through you, Mayor, this feels very unprecedented in terms of, you know, properties that have had these kinds of situations occur, especially during a winter storm. I know that during that period in which this break happened, MLE received a number of complaints and issued a number of orders during that winter storm. Could I get staff to just comment on, from an MLE perspective, is this typical for us to be waiting 8 weeks for proper attention by the landlord?
Through the chair to the councillor, it's not uncommon for municipal law enforcement to receive frozen pipe calls during the winter months, and this year was no exception. But I can state that at this point, all of the other complaints are in compliance, and this is one that remains outstanding.
Yeah, so just really clearly, all the other complaints of frozen pipes during that winter storm have been brought into compliance. This is the one file that remains out of compliance from that duration.
Through the chair to the councillor, that is correct.
Thank you, Mayor. It's really unfortunate that this hasn't been solved yet in terms of the nature and the time frame by which the residents have been displaced, no, not displaced, but also more significantly, you know, compromised in terms of their general quality of life and also access to something that should be freely available and readily available to every one of the residents of the city of Hamilton. We have A+ standard quality drinking water, and we have invested millions upon millions over many, many years to make sure our water infrastructure is functioning in a way that is safe and acceptable to every single resident across the city. I know the heart around the table here right now for the residents that are in 1083. It is absolutely unacceptable for these residents to be going this long without access to water. I visited the site and had a chance to meet with the residents and went door to door to the remaining apartments. And I have to say, the relief that the residents felt having their elected representative walk through the halls and understand through lived experience and putting my eyes and ears on the situation and talking to every single resident, it was an emotional visit. And the reality that tenants in that building feeling a lack of dignity, the fact that some of those residents were offered accommodation that were halfway across the city without any access to transit to get to, which is totally unacceptable from my perspective for the landlord to offer, knowing what they know about the tenant. These tenants continue to pay their rent on time, in full amount. And these are the conditions under which they're being expected to continue to endure. I think it's absolutely horrendous. And I do appreciate staff who I've had a chance to meet with today, this morning, in terms of those proactive measures, outlining that they will be able to continue having conversations with the landlord. Fundamentally, it's the interest of this municipality to get that water restored and to make sure that these tenants are enjoying the same quality of life every other tenant in every single postal code across the city is able to enjoy. That said, Mayor, if I could just amend the direction to this correspondence. It currently says to be received and referred to the General Manager of Healthy and Safe Communities. There are items in these correspondences that have to deal with public health, and there's items in this correspondence that have to do with enforcement. So I would like to amend it by saying receive the correspondence and direct it to staff in Healthy and Safe Communities, Public Health, and Planning and ECDEV to address the concerns that these correspondences outline. Thank you.
Okay, so then with the motion, do you have a seconder?
For correspondences, I thought amendments
We don't need
are
to
just
have
done
any,
at the end.
we don't need a formal motion? Okay, that's fine, that's easier. Thanks, Councillor Nan. Appreciate your activism on this particular file. It's extremely important. We now have further speakers. Councillor Clark. Please.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just, I'm trying to understand how the city of Hamilton is addressing a landlord who denies water to the residents in their building. How is it that we came to an agreed statement of facts at a property standards meeting over water? It's not soil being piled up in a backyard. It's not rats running free. It's water. This is the best that we can do, Mayor? I'm really troubled by this. Because if this is happening here, I know how some of these landlords work. There will be another building down the street where they'll shut off the water and claim, oh, we got a broken pipe, and force everyone out, and then it's all over. You can see how frustrated I am, and I think most of my colleagues around this table are scratching their head. How is it that the city of Hamilton can sit back and allow a landlord to deny an entire apartment building water for this length of time? The councillors refer to the appropriate divisions, but we really should have a report back to GIC explaining exactly how we came to this. Because if we don't do it now, I guarantee you we're going to be doing it soon, because there's going to be many other landlords who are going to say, wow, that guy got away with it. Why can't I get away with it? So, Mayor, I'll leave it with you in terms of where it has to go, but I can't even use the word dumbfounded. It's just, I'm shocked. I'm incredibly disappointed that this has happened. There's no way in heck someone should be allowed to shut off the water to an entire apartment building for this length of time.
Agreed. Thanks, Councillor Clark. Councillor Danko. Oh, I'm sorry? 5.8. Is there anybody else on this item then? Councillor McMeekin, were you on the water item for 1083
Yes,
Main Street? Okay.
Your Worship, I want to thank the councillor for her proactive, reactive visit to the site and meeting with the residents. My concern, listening to the description of what's happening in building, I think on very important points, Councillor Clark. I want to know what the plan is. Surely there must be some, other than a simple referral. Is there some specificity to what's going to happen with respect to this this terrible situation? That's my question.
Councillor McMeekin, are you referring that to staff then, or we have GM
Yeah,
Thorne and
yeah,
I think
whatever-
Cirillo still?
Presumably the staff have been engaged according to the councillor. I just want to know what the plan is.
Okay. GM Thorne, please.
So through the chair, as Director Cirillo noted, in terms of the immediate next steps, so the hearing yesterday did confirm the city's order, which does require the landlord to make the necessary repairs. And does require the landlord to take over the provision of potable water, which in the interim the city had been doing. And so as Director Cirillo noted, in terms of immediate next steps, we're going to be communicating what those requirements are so that the tenants are aware, and making sure that we, from a bylaw enforcement standpoint, are monitoring compliance with that order, so to make sure that the water is being provided as it's supposed to be. And as the Director Cirillo also noted, make sure that the landlord is clear in terms of the residents' expectations on some of these other matters as well, including the ones that were spelled out in the correspondence, as well as other ones that have been conveyed to us either directly by the residents or through the councillor's office, so that they are aware as well.
Thanks, Jim Thorne. Councillor McMeekin?
That sounds good as far as it goes. I wonder if there's a timeline attached to any and all of that.
Jim Thorne?
So through the chair, in terms of the communications, we're looking to do that over the next day or two so that the tenants are aware of what the requirements are. In terms of the decision of the committee yesterday, for that I would have to go to Director Cirillo to confirm the details.
Through the chair to
Cirillo?
Sorry, through the chair to the councillor. The decision yesterday requires the matter to be back before the Property Standards Committee no more than 45 days. There's still an outstanding landlord-tenant board matter, which is coming forth on March 8th. So we anticipate that soon after that, we will be back before the Property Standards Committee. But again, no later than 45 days from yesterday's date.
But possibly as soon as shortly after the March 8th date. Is that what you were saying, Director Cirillo?
Through the chair to the councillor, absolutely. As soon as we get that clarity from that decision, we will be able to set a date as soon as possible.
Thanks for the clarification. Councillor McMeekin?
Yes, thanks. That's helpful. Maybe a rhetorical question. Looking at this, given the Councillor Clark's specific reference to look out, this is going to happen again, and we need to be quickly on top of it. From a case to cause perspective, are there some things that we should be doing in terms of some bylaw enhancements or some other protections, requirements that we need to be putting in place to ensure that when situations like this arise, we don't have to wait 45 days to get a substantive correction to a terrible situation? Is it worth looking at some additional protection? We have bylaws on where you can tie your horse downtown and other things. I'm wondering, I think, but I'm wondering that, there's some bylaws maybe we need to have in place to foster better tenant protections.
Thanks, Councillor McMeekin. It seems to me that that's why Councillor Nan is suggesting that this be referred to a number of different places, and why Councillor Clark was asking for a report back to GIC, Public Health and Planning, as well as what's in this direction in correspondence, General Manager of Health and Safety Communities. It's not something I think we can really address in any fulsome way around this council table, but that work that you're talking about can be done by those bodies and give council some options, I think, to address these kinds of concerns.
That's helpful. Looks like we have.
General Manager Thorne actually had something to add as well.
Oh, good, super.
Yeah, so through the chair, if council wanted to be more specific in the direction with respect to report back, we could certainly report back on, I would say, an information report just to outline both the the scope and authorities and, frankly, the limitations within the two key bylaws that come into play in a situation like this would be property standards and vital services, and sort of spell out what the scope and limitations are of those, particularly in situations that start to sort of bleed into issues that are in the jurisdiction of landlord-tenant tribunal as well. So if that's of interest, we can bring that forward for information so that council and the public are aware as kind of what the jurisdictions and scope of those two key bylaws are.
I think that would be very helpful, General Manager Thorne. Thanks very much. Okay, Councillor McMeekin?
Yeah, I concur. I think doing that would potentially be a good springboard to considering some other changes that we may need to make. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor McMeekin. Councillor Cretch, please.
Thanks for that, Councillor McMeekin. The visual image of the horse downtown tied to a post, is helpful actually in this, because I think if someone had left their horse downtown, somebody would come get the horse. And I think someone needs to come get the horse here. So what I want to ask staff firstly, and then I have a comment to make, is, look, if the sidewalks are not clean in front of a development in the downtown core, people can call and complain about that. And then the city will hire someone to come out and clean those sidewalks and charge the landowner for the cost of the clearing of the sidewalks and fine them. Why, in this situation, can we not simply hire someone to do this repair and charge the owner of the property?
General Manager Thorne, please.
So through the chair, that is a remedy that ultimately exists in the bylaw if and when the order expires and if it has not been dealt with, if it sort of has not been implemented by the property owner. So that is a remedy that exists within the property standards bylaw, which is the bylaw that was invoked in this situation. What the committee, or sorry, what the hearing determined yesterday did uphold the order, but it did note, and I'll go to Monica to confirm the details in terms of the timeline for them to come into compliance. If they fail to do so, then just like with a sidewalk situation or a long grass and weeds or one of those sort of more typical property standards violations, then that remedy does exist for the city.
Director Cirillo, do you have anything to add?
Through the chair to the councillor, no, GM Thorne has covered it.
Thank you, Councillor Cretch.
Thanks. It seems like there's already an order that was not complied with before we got to property standards, though. So we're letting this go on for 8 weeks. And I think that there is actually a precedence here. And if not, can this council supersede one? Like, this is going to carry on for 45 more days, which is another 6 weeks. So we're talking about 14 weeks. Then we'll have another polite conversation with the landlord. We say to them, gosh, would you put this into compliance? People would like some water. And we'll do things like make sure the landlord's clear on the tenant's expectations. The landlord is clear on the tenant's expectations, let me tell you. So there's no reason why we should be delaying this. I do think there's a chance for this body, actually, maybe on other business. If Councillor Nan wants to put forward a motion, I'd be happy to second it, to accelerate this, to do something about it. Maybe it seems unusual for us to take a certain step, but it's unusual for people not to have water for 8 weeks. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Councillor Cretch. Councillor Nan, please, for a second time.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and honestly, thank you to my colleagues around the table for speaking up on this. It has been my concern that this is precedent setting, and there is definite concern that this kind of situation will continue. And in fact, we've been hearing from tenant delegations year upon year about the risks and impacts of renovictions, and which is what led us towards the path last term of moving towards creating a bylaw regime, not too dissimilar to the one in New Westminster and other municipalities, to ensure that tenants are protected in these kinds of situations expressly. So if I could, through you to staff, just get a clarity around the timeline of that bylaw development, where are we at on that? And then I also have a question about our vital services bylaw, which was mentioned, and whether or not, when it was established, and when was the last time it's been reviewed, and perhaps the direction could also include that report back that's going to come, include a review of other municipalities' vital services which have been upgraded over the course of the last 5 years to address these exact situations.
Thanks, Councillor Nan. GM Thorne?
So through the chair, I'll try to speak to all those, but if I miss any, please correct me. So starting with the report back, yes, we can look at what other jurisdictions do. And as I said, we'd be looking, I think the most applicable bylaws here are vital services and property standards, although likely we should include in that scope the public health bylaws as well, because they may be relevant in situations like this. In terms of last update to vital services bylaw, I can't recall. Monica might be able to speak to it. I know with property standards, I believe it was just over a year ago, in response to some concerns actually about similar issues around allegations of renovictions and things like that. We did update the property standards bylaw to bring into scope a number of other matters, such as operations of elevators, operations of key appliances, those sorts of things within rental housing. So that was the most recent update to the property standards bylaw that I can recall. I don't know if Monica can speak to when we last looked at the vital services bylaw. And then I'm sorry, Councillor, I can't remember what your second question was.
The renovictions bylaw.
Director Cirillo, do you have any update on the vital services bylaw piece?
To the chair, to the councillor, yes, it was updated in 2021.
Okay, so I just wanted to let General Manager Thorne know that the other piece that Councillor Nan was looking for was progress on the renoviction bylaw, or renoviction regime issue.
Yeah, so through the chair, so I think the council is referring to a precedent that we were asked to look at in New Westminster, BC, and I think there she is now. GM Burden's team was looking at that one.
Thanks very much. GM Burden, please.
Thank you, General Manager Angie Burden, General Manager of Healthy and Safe Communities. Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. We have engaged a consultant currently to look at that Westminster bylaw and the renovictions piece, and that report is coming forward, I believe, in April for council's review. I'm not sure if I can speak to the ability to add this piece to that work, and I would invite, if there's a question on that, perhaps Director Baird could respond to that piece. For you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, GM Burden. Councillor Nam?
Yeah, I think that General Manager Thorne mentioned that there would be a report back to General Issues Committee with an overview of the scope of the bylaws as well as limitations in them. So I would just add that there be a review of corresponding municipal bylaw changes to vital services that this municipality ought to consider, given the circumstances that these 9 tenants find themselves in, and to ensure that this kind of situation never happens again. So protecting ourselves and the tenants in a suite of bylaws, not just property standards, not just vital services, but also the new bylaw that we're in the process of developing right now through the leadership of Housing Services. The last piece on this that I wanted to just clarify was in terms of other next steps that can be taken. I will take some time to put together a motion, given the interest around the table and colleagues wanting to see that this be dealt with an accelerated track, and that 45 days is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Nan. Can I ask Councillor Danko to take the chair so I can say a few words on this before we go into second time speakers, although Councillor Nan did have her second time speaker opportunity. I want to say that it's very frustrating to have this happening here at the City of Hamilton and know that it's happening around the province. And we all know where I've come from, and we all know that for many, many years now, the governments at the provincial order of government have not been taking seriously the appropriate regime to protect tenants' rights and landlords' rights, frankly. And now we have a situation where we have an Ontario tribunal that's not staffed well enough to actually deal with a lot of these issues, and so things drag on and get worse and worse. And in the absence or the turning away from their responsibilities at the provincial order of government, which should deal with tenants and landlord matters across the entire province, we're now left as municipalities to pick up the pieces and try to figure out how do we, at a municipal level, deal with provincial legislation, right? Because that's what we're doing. We're dealing with provincial legislation and trying to figure out how we can, cover off the cracks in that legislation and the cracks in the administration of what weak legislation exists. And that's frustrating, I think, for all of us. Mostly, as we can see, it's devastating for people that have to deal with the situation like the tenants at 1083. And I want to say, kudos to folks around this table currently, as well as the last term of council, to identify these concerns. you know that you may know that this was discussed many times in the Ontario legislature over the last, well, the time I was there. We're going to, I think, rely on staff to bring as fulsome a package as possible forward to basically fill the holes that the provincial government has left for municipalities to try to address while tenants are struggling to stay housed in a housing market that's pretty devastating. So on that note, thanks, Councillor Danko. I'll take back the chair. And now, Councillor Danko, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to highlight